Legends of Tomorrow Season 2, Episode 6, Outlaw Country. So this is a cool episode. We get to see the characters go back to the Wild West, which is honestly one of my favorite time periods. I just like the Old West. I like, the guns and stuff. I always thought it was cool. So we get to see them go back to the Wild West. We get to see them run into Jonah Hex again, which was pretty cool. I felt like it was a different actor. He sounded the same, but I was like, he looked different. But I think in the very first scene, he doesn't have a hat on, and he's like sweating and stuff. And I'm like, that looks like a totally different person. But I also wasn't paying much attention in the last season, so I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. But I like the story for this. So we have this random time pirate. He gets killed, and so this dude Turnbull ends up changing all of history because he ends up getting not just iron like he thought, but he ends up getting Dwarf Star alloy, and it allows him to have like insane super bullets and stuff, which is a really cool scene when he was using just like a normal revolver and it was shooting like it was almost like using a grenade launcher but in the miniature form. So I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, that's very interesting. That led to, of course, the revelation that Nate is actually vulnerable to Dwarf Star alloy. So if he gets shot, it won't explode, but of course it will pierce him like a normal bullet would pierce anyone else. Because anybody else would have blown up. Like they would have been done for. They would have completely died. But I thought it was cool. I was like, okay, didn't see that happening, and every freaking time, like for the dude that's like impenetrable, he just keeps getting wounded. He got stabbed before because when he couldn't control his powers in Japan, and then even when he was using his powers, because we get to see him utilize his powers a lot in this, which was really cool. But when he utilizes them, he ends up getting shot anyway, and it's like, oh man, they just keep hitting this dude in the stomach all the time. So they did a lot of good stuff in this, getting to see him use his powers. Him stopping the train at the end I thought was really cool. Like they were saying, I was like, that was pretty badass to me. Like it was simple enough. He stopped it, and I was like, that was actually really cool. I wasn't sure how that was gonna work. I didn't think he'd die or anything, of course, but just the way it was happening, I was like, man, this is pretty interesting. I don't know how to play out, but he solved that issue. I mean, it's like obliterated those train tracks, but still very interesting. So I thought that was something for sure. I like that ending sequence. They had a pretty cool connection, just like in the Japan episode. Another little parallel was Amara and Mick. I thought that was interesting, and Amara's trying to help Mick, where he's talking about kind of letting out the animal within, and that being the natural version of him, where he's supposed to fight off the guy who's changing all of history, and they end up hanging out because they're both like killers and robbers and stuff. And he's just telling them stories like, they told me to put my hands up and my pants fell down because all the loot I had on me. And they're just like buddy buddy. And then of course he goes nuts, and ultimately that's how Nate ends up getting shot. So they built up a little story. They're having a bit of a connection, and they're doing a lot of the leadership stuff. I think it's like really odd parallels in this to the Japan episode, because it's kind of the same thing with Ray and Nate again, where it was a different situation, but it was like Ray teaching Nate just a little. It was technically only in the very beginning where he's like, I can tell you, I can teach you like what they say and stuff and how to kind of blend in the Wild West. But they're definitely doing that with Amara and Mick for sure, just like the Japan episode where she's like, hey, you need to kind of rein it in. Like you don't have to suppress the the monster within you, or the animal within, but you can't let it control you, because it'll get you killed or get other people killed. You have to like calm that crap down. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I mentioned before that it seemed like they were kind of hinting towards a relationship between Amara and Nate, with especially the way they did like the dialogue in the last episode. But I don't know, maybe it might just be a friendship thing. I don't know if anyone will ever actually end up with Mick. He's just like the wild card, so you never know. But it's interesting how they're kind of playing it. It seems like it could be something more, but at this point it's just she's trying to help him, and they have like an odd connection because he's like the crazy wild card, and she's kind of the opposite, where she's very centered and controlled, and probably has to be considering her abilities. So I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, all right, I'm excited to see kind of where they take this. Nate gets his outfit at the end of this episode, which was pretty cool. It would have been a cooler reveal if they didn't have like the 4-part crossover trailer and they show his costume in there. I was like, oh, I wish they didn't show that. Like they should have waited, or just not have had that scene in the trailer. But they have him in the costume. I was like, oh, he has a costume. So that was kind of spoiled when I saw the trailer for the 4 series crossover thing. So when it got revealed, I was like, it still looks cool because it was like a split-second sequence in the trailer. But I was like, oh, that still looks cool. But I was like, I would have liked it if it was just, if they didn't put it in the trailer, which I've been seeing for like, the past week now, because every, all the DC shows, the trailers have all been for the crossover, because that's what's happening when the shows come back on. So, that it was fine. It's not like it was that big of a deal. I knew, I figured he was going to get a costume at some point, but it was nice. It's a nice looking suit. I'm excited to see them, see him in it, kind of full, because it looked weird in like that one sequence, but it's like an upward angle and stuff. So I'm like, that looks a little weird. But when I saw it just on the mannequin, on the stand, I was like, oh, that looks cooler than I thought it did, just in that quick glance. So I'm excited to see him kind of utilize it and stuff like that. And now they have all this Dwarf Star, and Ray mentioned, like, he made Nate's suit, which apparently only took like 2 days. So I don't know how he doesn't have a suit of his own. I mean, technically it's just clothing, so I mean, it's not like shooting beams and stuff, so I guess that makes sense. But I was like, man, he built that in like 2.5 seconds. Like, it was the beginning of the episode, he saw a sketch, and by the end he's like, yeah, I got this. I'm like, he should have had like he could have at least had like 2 arms done after all this time. And he made like that whole outfit. I'm like, he could have had something done for sure on his own thing. But I guess he technically needed all that power too. I hadn't actually considered that. I totally forgot the power source was so specific. So excited to see where they go with Ray now that he's got he's basically got what he needs to build the suit. So we're gonna see that obviously after the big crossover. But I'm really curious what his role is gonna be, since he doesn't have his suit and he can't fly around and help them out like he normally would. So I'm actually excited to see what they do with that. And then the rest of this episode was kind of Sarah once again having to deal with somebody not wanting to listen to her because she's a woman, which, I always thought Sarah was awesome, but this show makes her like even cooler, because with them jumping through time and stuff, and mostly they've been going in, in the past, they constantly deal with a bunch of like dudes, like, I'm not listening to a woman and stuff, and she doesn't take that crap, and she's basically like, when she talks with Jonah, and she's like, I could kill you as easily as I saved you. And I think later in the episode, he was like, I don't like taking orders from a woman. And she said something like, you'd like getting your ass kicked by a woman even less. And I was like, that's, like, Sarah's already awesome. But this show, it just gives them an opportunity to make her even cooler, because she doesn't take that crap. And it's basically like, that's too bad for you. Like, I can beat you to death if you prefer. Like, those are your 2 options. You either listen to me or you die. So it just, like, I love it every time she has to deal with that stuff, because she doesn't take that crap from anybody. So it's always entertaining. Jonah finding out that she was gay was also funny to me. Like, the face he made when Mick was like, I forgot the term he used, like that old West term for ladies, but saying that she was into woman, and he was drinking, he was like, you don't say. And I was like, just the way he looked, I thought was really funny. But them having a conversation, of course, they argue and stuff at the beginning. It's mostly, it kind of made me, Hex was kind of annoying me, because he's just, it was just old West style, where it's like, I don't like to listen to a woman. And so, which was weird. I never, I don't know much about Jonah Hex, so I was like, oh, because he's supposed to be like the hero in his own comic. I guess I just assumed he'd be, not every hero has to be progressive, I guess. So you got to see different types of heroes throughout time. We also got to see that with Rex Tyler as well, I guess. But, I thought it was cool. It's like, they argue and stuff. He's being kind of a dick, really, because not only does he not want to talk, listen to Sarah, but he also doesn't want to, share his story about what happened to him, which I figured when he talked to, when it was like, he had a vendetta when Sarah mentioned it to him. I was like, he's probably the guy that burnt his face. And then we get the story. And that's exactly what happened. Like, his rebellion in that city caused basically everyone in that city to die except for him, but his face, of course, got distorted. So, that was his bit of revenge, where he wanted to just murder this guy. And, he actually did listen to Sarah by the end, and he knocks him out instead of, like, just choking the guy to death. But it was cool to see Jonah come back, and, they, of course, mentioned Rip, because he's like, where is he? So, they got that little reference in there because they had their connection. But I like this episode. It was cool to see them in the Old West. It had a lot of comedy. I thought there were some really funny moments. I think when Nate first saved Jonah, and he was saying, like, the silly line, he was like, ride till you can't ride anymore, and then he, like, pulled the hammer back on the gun. He's like, and then keep riding. And then he was just shooting in the air. I'm like, what is his problem? Like, he's so excited right now. So it definitely has some great comedy. To me, I love the comedy in this episode. But ultimately, I thought it was really fun. Just in general, I thought it had a good amount of action to it. A lot of TV magic in this one as well, because during the scene when they have the bar shootout. So they go in. They have Jonah. He goes in because he's tired of waiting, and is like, I'm tired of them buddying up. So screw this. I want him dead. He goes in and has like 3 dozen guns pointed at him, but like 12.5 people, probably 2 dozen full people. And then Sarah comes in. She whips the gun out of the dude's hand, out of Turnbull's hand, and then one person throws a punch. Everybody just starts throwing punches. There's only like 4 good guys in this whole thing, and somehow it's a bar brawl, but they all just had guns pulled. And I was like, that's some TV magic. Like, there were 2 dozen guns pulled on 4 people, and somehow it managed to end up being a punch out bar fight. And I was like, this TV magic, because that made no sense whatsoever. They all would have been shot up, and that would have been it. Because even the strippers, or well, the strippers, the whores, even they had guns. So it was like, that made no sense to me, but I thought that was funny. It was like some TV magic. It was just like the beginning of the episode. It wasn't exactly TV magic, but that time pirate was just dumb. It was clear he wasn't from the Wild West, because if someone has a gun already pointed at you, this isn't even a Wild West thing, this is just a logic thing. He should have known this, but if someone has a gun pointed at you already, you don't go to reach to your side to try to pull a gun out. Like, you can't draw on someone that already has a gun drawn on you. Like, it doesn't make any sense, especially when he's only like 5 feet away. It's not like he's gonna, shoot and the bullet's gonna like, jump around your shoulder. Like, I don't know what that guy was thinking. He clearly wasn't that fast either, because when he first ran into Turnbull, he tried to pull his gun out. Turnbull pulled like in 2 seconds, and the guy like pulled a little slow, and then he like pulled the hammer back slowly. I'm like, this guy, if they wanted to kill him, he would have been dead before he even like pulled it out. It was just clearly he was just dressed the part. He should have just kept his actual gun if he wanted to survive, but he was trying to blend in, so of course he just ends up getting killed off. But I thought that was crazy. I was like, what is this guy thinking? Like, this is a dude from the Wild West, and he's gonna hold this thing in one hand and then try to reach down from, because I guess it was basically at his chest. Both hands were like at his chest, and he's planning to reach down with his left hand to pull a gun all the way back up to his chest, so go all the way down and all the way back up to shoot this guy. Plus there were 2 other guys anyway. Even if he shot him, like, what was he thinking? So I was like, man, that guy was just not smart, and that was pretty obvious, because if you think that with what he was doing, it's like, screw this, I'll just kill whoever I want to kill. He was already trying to steal, precious minerals, from the past. So I was like, yeah, I guess he clearly doesn't care that much about messing up time. So I thought that was pretty crazy. But I did love this episode. I'm super excited for the crossover. I don't know how they're gonna do it, but I'm really excited for that. I don't think this has anything to do with the message, from Future Barry. That seems to be something that's going to happen, later in the season. We, of course, now have a pseudo new timeline, I guess, for Stein, which they might bring up. I think that might be one of the big plot points they actually bring up in the crossover, since they're going to go back to 2016. But we might have to wait for the Legends of Tomorrow episode to do that. But that seems like the one time, or the one story element from this episode that they can actually kind of carry over to the crossover, since they'll be in 2016. And it's like, alright, I'm starting to get these weird flashes and stuff of this brand new woman who may or may not be his new wife, and he's going to have to figure that stuff out before the aberration actually catches up with him. And I don't know how they're going to play it, but they could do it where he remembers it both ways, since he's constantly jumping through time. It's like, oh, I still remember both. It's not like he's just stuck in one time period and then it catches up. So I don't know how they're going to play around with that idea, but I'm actually excited to see what they do with it. And I think it might lead to some really good emotional stuff where he may not have much of a choice. He might not be able to go back and change it. He might just have to kind of give up his current wife and be like, man, I love this woman for years and years, and now I have to let her go because time just changed. So I hope it doesn't end up being that way, because that would be like super depressing to watch, because they already had it where he was freaking out about it before, and then even the last episode when he ran into his former self, that was the same thing where he's like, man, I sucked, and this is the woman I love, and I'm screwing, time has been all weird and stuff, so I can end up not having my wife again. It was like, it wasn't the main story of it, but it was still a scare in that last episode. So I hope it works out for him, because that would just be really sad. It's like, man, that sucks. All the crap they've gone through, and them doing their job is what leads to him, basically erasing his entire, marriage with his wife. So I don't know. It's pretty crazy. I hope it works out for him. But like I said, thought this was a really fun episode. Of course, definitely want to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And now that we are going into the 4-part crossover, at least I believe we are. Well, I know nothing's coming on next week because it's Thanksgiving. So should be the next episode will be the crossover thing. I want to know what storylines you think they will carry over into the crossover, and what they'll leave behind, because there's not much. Once they do crossover, it's like the normal stories do not matter anymore. It's like, this happened, all that crap is on pause right now because we need to do our big crossover. So I don't know what the alien thing is going to be, because that was the big thing. I thought one of these shows was going to lead to the crossover, but technically this is the only one that did it, and it was just like, yeah, they need our help in 2016. I was like, that's the closest actual tie into the crossover we've had. Every other episode has just been like, nothing else, not much. I know like Flash comes on next week, so maybe like Supergirl or Flash will, and I think Arrow comes on next week. Arrow wouldn't, because it's like the day before Thanksgiving. So I know Supergirl and Flash come on, so one of those have to be like the actual tie-in. But Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow is like, it was just like, episode went off and it's like, all right, next time's crossover, peace. So there hasn't been much of a tie-in to the actual crossover just yet. But like I said, I want to know what story elements from the actual show will carry over into the crossover. And of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.